Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. Things just keep getting worse and worse for Starbucks. First, they have their woke leftist customers up in arms because they're accused of canceling pride displays. Now, they have to pay a former employee tens of millions of dollars because she was fired for being white. Gang, it doesn't get better than this. A former Starbucks regional manager, a woman by the name of Shannon Phillips, has just been awarded over $25 million after a federal jury found that she was fired due to her race. Phillips, who is white, was terminated back in 2018 following the arrest of two black men at a Philadelphia Starbucks location. Now, Phillips was a high-ranking store manager. She actually oversaw approximately 100 stores in the Mid-Atlantic region and had been promoted to regional manager back in 2011 for exemplary performance. But all that changed back in 2018 when two black men entered the Rittenhouse Square Starbucks in Philadelphia and were denied access to the bathroom. I think they were told they weren't paying customers, so they couldn't use the bathroom. They were waiting for a business associate to arrive. Whatever the reason, employees felt unsafe, and they called the cops, and the men were subsequently arrested. Now, a video of the incident went viral, which in turn, of course, led to nationwide protests, which prompted Starbucks to apologize and implement racial sensitivity training for its near 200,000 employees across its 8,000 locations. Now, this woman, Shannon Phillips, claimed that in the weeks following that incident, Starbucks began unfairly punishing white employees to demonstrate their supposed repentance. And here's the key. Even if those employees had no involvement whatsoever in the Philadelphia store incident. So, for example, she claimed that she was instructed by a black superior to suspend a white manager due to racial discrimination allegations, which claimed that he paid ethnic minorities less than white employees. She pointed out that this manager had absolutely no say whatsoever on employees' wages. So the allegations were obviously false. Apparently, according to her testimony, that didn't matter. This black superior forced her to suspend this guy, which she did. And then 2 days later, without any warning whatsoever, she got fired. And during the court proceedings, Starbucks employees testified they overheard discussions among management that they wanted to send a strong message after the whole racial incident in Philadelphia. And these employees believed that ultimately Phillips was fired because of her race, because she was white, and for no other reason. And it was really interesting because what Starbucks tried to do is they tried to argue that Phillips was terminated due to poor performance, and they claimed that she lacked awareness of how the Rittenhouse Square situation impacted the company. Phillips' legal team countered by presenting tons of evidence showing her active presence during the controversy, her emotional support to employees. She argued that she actively immersed herself in the company's efforts to restore its reputation, to organize store managers to cover shifts at stores where employees feared protests, and she obviously swayed the jury, who in turn found Starbucks guilty of racial discrimination and awarded Shannon Phillips over $25 million. Now, this case is very interesting because it brings to the fore a major backlash that's happening. Some have called it a white lash, but it's a major social turning that promises to bring some major changes to our nation in the foreseeable future. But first, gang, let me ask you something. What if there were someone out there who kept a log of every single thing you did every minute of the day? It'd be pretty creepy, right? Well, what if I told you that's exactly what happens every time you go online? Your internet provider, like AT&T or Verizon, is allowed to store logs of every website you've ever visited, and they can legally sell this data to anyone. That's why you've got to use ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN reroutes your internet connection through their secure servers so your internet provider can't see or log what you do online. And what makes ExpressVPN so amazing is that unlike other VPN companies, they use trusted server technology, which makes it impossible for their VPN servers to store any data, including logs of any ExpressVPN customer. I mean, they're absolutely amazing. And you don't have to take my or ExpressVPN's word for it. ExpressVPN is so confident in their no logs claim, they had one of the biggest assurance firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers, audit their technology. I mean, it's no wonder the Tech Radar and The Verge named ExpressVPN the #1 VPN in the world. So stop letting people keep logs of what you do online. Click on that link below or visit expressvpn.com/Turley right now and find out how you can get 3 months absolutely free, but that's a limited time offer. So don't wait. Click on that link below right now. What this court decision highlighted is what's widely known today as reverse discrimination, which is generally defined as the unfair treatment and social exclusion of the dominant ethnicity. Unfortunately, reverse discrimination appears to be an intrinsic characteristic of what modern liberal society calls multiculturalism. Now, the term multiculturalism implies, of course, the equal inclusion of multiple cultures in any given society. In other words, liberal societies are not unicultural, they're multicultural, right? That's how they sell it. But it's widely recognized that that is not what liberal multicultural societies are. It's not merely a matter of multiple cultures equally participating in civic society. Multiculturalism often, if not always, involves reverse discrimination. You see, the problem is that multiculturalism invites minority groups to openly celebrate their racial ethnicity. So, for example, today we have Black History Month, or at the Super Bowl, we've got the performance of the so-called Black National Anthem, right? Regardless of what one thinks of this. The key is that certain groups, minority groups, are encouraged to be radically ethnocentric and celebrate their racial and cultural uniqueness openly. But, and here's the key, the dominant ethnic group, in this case white, is afforded no such luxury. The dominant ethnic group is not merely discouraged from celebrating their ethnicity, they're outright forbidden from doing so. Could you imagine celebrating White History Month or singing the white national anthem before the Super Bowl? Of course not. And so this ethno-cultural disparity, this asymmetry, or some would simply put it, this inequality, is provoking its own backlash. And it's been happening under the surface now for years. Professor Carol Swain, who is herself Black and a Trump supporter, by the way, interestingly enough, authored a very large and substantial study literally 20 years ago that predicted in many respects precisely this kind of backlash. And she noticed back in 2002, what she called the rise of the new white nationalism was very different than the white nationalists of the past, who understood white people to be biologically, genetically superior to non-whites. The new white nationalists, as she calls them, instead were motivated not by a sense of racial superiority, but rather by concerns over civil rights. In other words, what she found is that the growing white nationalist movement was making the case that the current project of multiculturalism unfairly and arbitrarily discriminated against white people and white interests on behalf of non-white constituents whose interests were taking a priority in terms of national policy. In other words, again, as Swain put it, if blacks get to vote their political interests, Latinos get to vote their political interests, Asians get to vote their political interests, and on and on and on, then why on earth can't whites vote on behalf of their own political interests? So what she was calling the new white nationalism wasn't motivated by so much by overt racism. In fact, all indicators show that racism is at an all-time low today. It's not overt racism that's motivating the new white nationalism, as she calls it, but rather it's being provoked by what more and more whites perceive as deliberate discrimination against them simply because they happen to be white. And Professor Swain's work has been corroborated of late by a relatively recent study that found that more than half of white Americans believe that whites have replaced blacks as the primary victims of discrimination. And so the important point here is that this culture of racial grievance that the original Philadelphia Starbucks incident became a part of, this culture of racial grievance is actually a two-way street. It doesn't move in only one multicultural direction. This is what Carol Swain was pointing out. It's not just ethnic and racial minorities that get to claim racial discrimination. Now, increasingly, whites are going to appeal to those very same discriminatory dynamics as well. And in turn, they're going to win. They're going to increasingly win in the courts. They're going to win in politics. They're going to win in culture precisely because they're tapping into the very civil rights rhetoric that's been so legitimized by the practitioners of grievance politics that have thus far inordinately benefited racial minorities, but will now eventually increasingly benefit whites as well, which means that we may indeed be seeing nothing less than the end of liberal multiculturalism and its practice of reverse discrimination. Hey gang, if you want to connect with more courageous patriots and start taking action and organizing, be sure to join my Telegram group. I post the latest breaking news I find interesting and chat with my favorite patriots around the country and even the world. Click the link in the description below and join the conversation today.